Welcome, everyone, to the Transformation Nurse Academy podcast. This is our weekly episode, Talk with Kevin, where we cover topics for all nursing fields with extra emphasis on emergency and critical nursing. Get ready for candid discussions that explore the vast landscape of nursing and beyond.
Matt Norman here, and I appreciate Matt. Matt's a registered nurse out of New York, if I'm not mistaken.
Florida.
So where did I get New York? Is that from your book?
No, I ain't even
Where did I
been to
get
New
New
York.
York from? Man, I must have been high or something, man.
I don't know.
I don't know where I got New York for some reason. Now I'm going to have to go back and read your book again because for some reason I got New York in my mind. All right, so before we start, just tell everybody about you. Where do you live? How long you been in nursing? What your specialty is?
Well, I'm in Central Florida. I think we mentioned that, just outside Orlando. Been a nurse 24 years. Spent most of that time in the ER, but I've done informatics. I did interventional radiology. I worked for about 3 years in an outpatient oncology center, and I've been an educator for the last 5 years. So, got 3 years in hospital and about 2 years actually at a university.
All
Now
right.
I'm back in hospital, but then also going to be teaching part time at a
Yeah.
college near the hospital I work at.
So now you're a professor, Norman.
Professor
I
Matt,
like
I prefer.
Oh,
Yeah,
I got you. I like that though. It's good. I like
yeah.
that though. So do you like teaching?
I love teaching, dude.
Yeah.
So a few years ago, 2019, before COVID, I've been a nurse almost 20 years. And in my area, I couldn't get a hospital to call me back.
Oh,
I'm
no
looking to
way.
transition and because I didn't have a BSN, they
Right.
wouldn't talk to me. Now it's different. Now, as long as you got a license and a pulse,
They'll
you can
give
pretty
you
much.
in.
So I told my wife, I guess I need to go back and get my bachelor's. And she said, well, as long as you're going, you may as well get your master's. And that's when I'm like, okay, well, what I want to do with it, and realize I had always been educating, whether it
Right.
was in the church or in the hospital or anything, and really love doing that. So I've got a master's and I've got an MSN, a master's of science in nursing with a focus on education.
Yeah, that's nice. Cause same thing with you. I spent the last 30 years in the healthcare. I was a combat medic. I didn't have a BSN either, and nobody would look, I mean, I always got a job, but nobody really recognized me and stuff.
Right.
And then as soon as I got my BSN, oh my God, Kevin, I'm like, I'm the same son bitch
Right.
I was yesterday and shit.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, makes no sense, does now that I wanna teach in the college, now you gotta have a master. I'm like, "Son of a bitch."
Right.
So, I don't wanna go back to school, I'm tired of going to school, so I have a master's in business, but they won't count it.
No, no, it's got to be
Yeah,
an
see,
MSN.
so
And
right. So, I'm like, "I don't care no more, I give up."
I did my master's in 8 months
Right,
because of the program I went to. So
right. Which ones you
uh,
go through?
Western Governors
Yeah,
University.
that's what I did my BSN through there,
Yeah. So did I.
I could probably do the same thing with the MSN, I'm just tired, man, I'm like, I don't
I
even
feel you.
care no more. Yeah.
I feel you. That's why I did it while I was there, because I'm like, I did my BSN, took me 5 months, and then I stayed in, did my master's in another 8 months, and was
Right,
done. Because I knew I wouldn't go back. I mean, I didn't want to be sitting in a classroom with a bunch of 20
right,
year olds
right.
that didn't know anything, or spending 4 years getting my master's degree. I didn't have time for
Right.
that.
Now they're your charge nurses, though.
Right. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right, so tell me a little bit. I have questions here, so if I go off script, I'm sorry. But how did your journey in nursing lead you to recognize the significance of your six pillars? Now, in his book, The Restore Nurse, just correct me if I say anything wrong. So, in his book, The Restore Nurse, his six pillars are physical health, work health, mental health, financial health, relational health, and spiritual health. So, how did your journey lead you to recognize the significance of these six pillars? And how do these pillars influence your approach to nursing and life now?
Well, like yourself, I've been a nurse a long time in healthcare. First started in healthcare as a phlebotomist in 1996. So I'm
Wow.
approaching 30 years as well. I actually went to EMT school in 94 and realized that the job sucked and so did the pay. So I didn't do that.
Right.
Mad respect for those folks that do that, but it
Right.
wasn't for me. So I started a few years ago and you kind of read the story, at least part of it in the book, where I was done. I mean, I had always loved being a nurse, but I hated what nursing had become. And I still do. I mean, nursing is an
Right.
absolute mess right now. I love being a nurse. I love patient care. I love the camaraderie and teamwork that we always had in the ER. And I mean, I loved all of that. But nursing has just gotten so messy right now that I found myself, and again, I tell this story in the book, but I found myself standing in the woods, literally screaming to God that I just wanted to love being a nurse again,
Right.
and I didn't. And so I contemplated for a while leaving nursing.
Right.
And I realized that not being a nurse scared me more than whatever I was facing in nursing. Like, who was I going to be? And I had promised myself as a young man that I would never do that, that I would never become so intertwined with whatever my job was that it began to identify me. Okay.
Right.
And so when I started that self exploration and started to think about the nurses around me, I realized that what I was feeling, most of my colleagues were too. It's a
Right.
very rare nurse that hasn't had that moment where they, "Who am I if I'm not a nurse?" kind of thing,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
I agree.
So, I started with kind of figuring out who's Matt and how do I begin to build a life that I actually want to live? And as through that process, there's 168 hours in a week. On average, most nurses spend 36 to 48 hours working. So even
Right.
if you're on the 48-hour side of that, that still leaves 120 hours in a week. Yet we blame our job for the fact that our life sucks.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, but
And
we're money whores.
we are. We
We
are.
are. We're money
That's
whores.
that's part of the problem, though. We tend to
Yes.
build these lifestyles that require us. I've worked with so many nurses, awesome nurses, that would work 60 hours a week so they could pay for their Mercedes.
Right.
And
Or their Gucci purses or all their fancy stuff and
right, right, or
yes.
big fancy whatever the thing
Right.
is, house, whatever the thing is, and it's different for all of us. But as I did this self exploration, I realized that my two biggest needs, and these are in the specific chapters in the book, were physical health, morbidly obese, and I'm working on it. I'm making
You don't
progress.
look morbidly obese to me.
Well, it didn't
You
show on my
don't.
face, but I'm over 300 pounds, so
You're still
um,
beautiful.
yeah, well, thank you, man. I appreciate that. And financial health, and I mentioned that in the book as well. When
Right.
my wife and I
Yeah, I saw
started
that.
that piece of the journey, we had $200,000
Yeah.
in debt, not including our mortgage. And so the more I explored this, the more I realized that all of these different pieces, the physical, the work, I mean, the physical, the mental, the financial, the relational, the spiritual health, they all work together or they don't.
Right.
There's a graphic in my book that almost looks like a Roman temple, like the Parthenon
Right,
in
right.
Greece. And each of these pillars, as I call them, is holding up the roof, and that roof is the restored life. But if you start taking these pillars away, then the whole thing collapses.
Right.
And through my own journey of self exploration and trying to, who is the man that Matt wants to be? Who's the husband that my wife deserves and the father that my children deserve? Who is that guy? Then I realized if I'm going to really be that guy, I've got to approach all of these things.
Right.
So I began developing this stuff in my own life. And then from then, I realized all these other nurses I know, I mean, there's some of them that physical health, I mean, I've known some that just incredible physical health, but we're a bad day away from suicide,
Right.
you know,
Well, most
or
people who smile on the outside are hurting on the inside. So yeah,
absolutely. We see
I
some of
get
these
that.
big celebrities that spend their entire life making other people happy and then
Yeah.
take, and then
Robin Williams.
absolutely. Yeah, exactly. He's the one that comes to mind when I think of
Right.
that. Or I've known, they had good mental health, but their relationships were crap. Their children
Right.
hated them and they were divorced. And I'm not bagging on anybody that gets divorced. I mean, crap happens. Sometimes
Right.
it's
Right.
just not right. Sometimes
Right.
you're in a situation that you got to get out of, and that is totally cool. Okay. I'm not bagging on anybody for that. But sometimes these things happen because of the choices that we've made. And that's on both partners in a marriage. But
Right.
so, how does it influence my approach to nursing? That kind of outlines how it influences my approach to life. But since developing these six pillars and starting to really try to incorporate these into my life, probably the biggest thing is an increased focus on work health. Okay. But I realized that, so I've been a nurse a long time, like we talked about. My back and my knees still work, oddly
Right.
enough. Okay. And when I got to thinking about this, the advantage that I had, and well, you between being a combat vet and a nurse, your knees and back are probably both shredded. But
I'm still healthy, man. I just
hey,
turned 55 and I'm still running.
there you go. There you
I'm
go.
good, man. I'm not hurting yet.
Yeah, awesome. But a lot of the women I know, even some of those that
Right,
are they're at a healthier weight, I'll say, than I am, their knees and their back kill them.
right,
And the reason for that is I went into it with more physical strength than they did.
right.
Okay. So even though I haven't done anything that made me more resilient physically, I already naturally was because of physical strength. So then I start looking at, okay, how can we help nurses become more resilient in that way, their physical strength, their physical health? And ultimately, the reality is so most nurses and most caregivers, but I speak to nurses because I am one. And most of the people that get into any sort of healthcare or caregiving field or service oriented field were really good at taking care of everybody else
Except
and
ourselves.
ignoring except ourselves.
Right.
Exactly. And the reality is that at some point, and we can do that for a long time, but at some point we run out. And so if we're not taking care of these other things, these six pillars, it will affect
Yeah.
our job as a nurse. We may be checking all the boxes, but we're not giving as good care of our patients as we
Right.
could if these
Right.
things were taken care of.
Well, I had a lady, she was one of our psych patients that come to the ED not that long ago. She was, I don't know how old you are, but I'm sure you're close to my age and stuff, but was in her 50s and she was a NICU nurse and she would poop in the bed in these little nuggets and she thought that they were her babies and she'd want us to resuscitate them. And then all I could think about, no joke, I'm like, damn, is this my future and shit? Because, we see so much crap and then we don't talk, we don't get it
Right,
out, we don't take care of ourselves. And then by the time we are hurt and we can't work as much, then maybe we're going to have mental issues and stuff,
right.
because we don't share our thoughts and our feelings and
No,
we
we
don't
don't.
take care of ourselves. And
We don't. I worked, like I said earlier, I mentioned I spent most of my career in the ER. And a bunch of years ago, I actually went to this sheriff department in my county, got some
yeah,
training with their critical incident stress debriefing team. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but for any listeners that aren't, critical incident stress debriefing team are trained professionals that will come in after a significant event. Whether maybe it's so we're talking law enforcement, then
right,
maybe it's a colleague that's been shot or a school shooting, or
right,
if it's EMS, maybe it's a mass casualty incident, something that's outside of the realm of their normal. And they come in, they're trained specifically to give these people an opportunity to debrief, to
right,
unload of all that, right? So I went and got this training and put together a team and ran it for a year and received exactly zero phone calls.
right.
You
Why
know,
though? Why do you think nobody calls?
yeah, well, it's a bunch of things. So I think some of it's pride, some of it's we're just so busy. Well, I've got 4 other patients I gotta take care of. I don't
And
have
I've been
time.
in the ED so long, and I've never had a debriefing ever,
No.
ever. People just you see people dying and they move on to the next one like we
Right.
don't. It's just crazy though. I don't get that.
Well, and some of that is just the way it is because we do have other patients that need to take care of,
Right.
and,
Yeah, but
the
how
dead
long is it gonna take? 30 seconds, a minute to have a debriefing to say, "Hey, Matt, you feeling okay, man? I mean, you want to share anything? You need a fucking hug?" Or
right.
I
Absolutely.
mean, there's nothing wrong
Absolutely.
with that.
No, not at all, not at all. In fact, that makes you a much healthier person in the long term,
Yeah.
you
All right.
know?
So your book is called The Restored Nurse, and then I have a question here. It says the restored nurse delves into themes of restoration across various aspects of life. So, how do you address the interplay between the six pillars in your book, and how can nurses prioritize them amidst the demands of their profession? So, taking your six pillars, how can we use those to better ourselves and better our nursing and get our compassion back?
Well, I think that it starts in the one of the early chapters. It's been a while since I've actually read my own
No,
book
I
now,
got
but
you.
in one of the earlier chapters, I talk about identity, and I talk about
Is that one of your
a
exercises?
it's one of the exercises. Yes,
I
sir.
did that exercise where you made me write a list of the things that who is Kevin,
Exactly. That's
and I
exactly
did
where I'm
this
going.
exercise. I wrote down brother, father, mentor, nurse, coach, entrepreneur, veteran, and husband.
Okay.
And then you made me go back and number them.
Right.
Which one's number 1, do you think?
Well, I know what my answer is, but it might
What
be
do you think
different for
mine is?
everybody.
Right, but what do you
Uh,
think mine is?
well, husband, I would hope.
Yes, that's right, look
Good
at you, you
good man.
beautiful guy. Yeah, I love that. That's good.
Yeah. But the
Yeah,
reality is though, and that is exactly what I was talking about, Kevin. We don't think about if we ask somebody, is your job more important than your family? Zero nurses are going to say yes to that.
right,
Every single nurse is going to say my family is far more important. But then if you ask the same one, how many ball games did you miss last year?
Right.
And some of them will say all of them,
Right.
you know,
And then they blame it on work,
and they blame it on work.
but it's
And
not work. It's us.
that's right. It's the choices we make. So I love my parents to death, but they did a great job. But one thing they messed up in is they were seldom at the things that were important to me. So when I
Right.
played Little League Baseball, they dropped me off, and
Right.
they didn't come. When I played in the band in high school, the marching band was my life in high
Right.
school. They
What
didn't-
instrument you play?
Saxophone.
All right. All right. My wife played the flute.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I actually met my wife in band camp
All right.
and
Oh, yes.
at
One
the high
time in
school.
band camp.
At one time in band camp.
Yeah, that's
Right.
nice. That's good.
So that was my whole, and my parents weren't there, and that's something I actually dealt with later, and I'm not mad at my parents, but they missed the mark on that one. And a lot of nurses are making that same mistake. And then they wonder why they have a 20-year-old that moves out and never comes home,
Right.
never comes over. Our son, so because of my own experience, I swore I'm going to be at everything. I'm going to be
Right.
there so much that my kids are annoyed by how much my wife and I are there.
Right. I
Okay.
get you.
And until they look at me and say, Dad, do you really have to come to this event? And I'm going to say, Yes, I do. And
Right.
you know what? They've never said that. My
And
son
you're
is
gonna
now,
appreciate it later on though when they will, they'll
absolutely.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I think my kids looked around and realized there's only like a couple of parents that are here all the time. And, there's maybe 5 parents that are here all the time. 2 of them are mine,
Right.
and it's because me and my wife are literally at everything. But I knew that that meant I had to make some choices professionally, some choices that probably cost me money. It meant choosing jobs that made me available in the evenings,
Right.
probably paid a little less than I could have if I'd have stayed at the bedside in the ER or maybe taken a management position or whatever. And again, I'm not
Knocking
judging
people. Yeah,
anybody.
I
Right.
get you.
But our son and his now wife, he's 22 years old. Actually, they're both 22. They come over every Sunday for dinner. They come over every other Saturday. We play Dungeons and Dragons at our house, and the two of them come over and play. But many of the other adults I know, their kids hardly ever come over.
Right.
You know, I was not a perfect father. I messed up big time in some other
Yeah.
things,
No,
but I
but at
was
least you're wise enough to realize how you can get better and stuff. I get that.
yeah,
I
yeah.
totally get that. The problem though is I think that, and I'm being sexist now, we're in a female dominated society. And I always tell the nurses that I teach and stuff who are mainly women, I'm like, women want three things in life: security, security, and security. But they use this guilt because you wrote in there in one of your books, you talk about guilt
Mhm.
versus, can't read my own writing, guilt versus, what's the word that you wrote in?
Resentment.
Resentment.
Yeah.
So I think they use that to take advantage of people because
Oh,
a
sure.
lot of people say, "Oh, they made me come to work today." Like they didn't make you do shit. You
Right.
chose to go to work. Well, who's going to take care of them? Who cares? That's not your problem. That's management's problem. But I think they use that guilt to their advantage to make us feel guilty, so we will come to work.
Mhm.
But then
Yeah,
if we die, they don't care who's, they'll replace us tomorrow and stuff.
yeah. Yeah,
And
you're
then
absolutely right.
you're gonna resent later on in life, you're gonna resent not being at your kids', activities. You're gonna resent not doing what you needed to do to take care of yourself. I agree with that.
And you know what? Nursing does mean we're gonna miss some stuff,
Right,
okay? Maybe if you're, a hospital nurse working 312s, maybe you miss some baseball games, but,
right.
you
But
know,
not
my daughter.
not all of them.
Not all of them, not even
Right,
most of them. Most of them
right,
you should be there,
right.
and your kids will understand they're cool if you miss an occasional one, so long as they can see the effort for you to be there the majority of the time,
Well,
you know?
I brainwash my kids.
Yeah.
So if you ask any of my kids, if you call them right now and say, Matt, what are you? And all my kids will say, I'm a Stansberry. And then I'll ask them, what can you do? Anything. Are you a consumer or a producer? We're a producer.
There you go.
Yeah, so I make them think positive. So in your book, you do talk about your faith. You do have a lot of Bible verses that go along with your six pillars. Integrating your Christian faith into your nursing practice. How do you see these six pillars intersecting with spiritual health? And what strategies do you employ to maintain a balanced approach to holistic care? Because not everybody is Christian. How do you balance the two and help keep those balance in between your patients, your coworkers?
It starts with an understanding that my faith is my faith, okay? And Jesus when we read through the Bible, the only people that Jesus was ever really hard on were the church people.
Right.
Those that were not church people or not believers, all he ever did was show them
Love
love
them.
and
Yeah.
compassion.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I try to emulate that. If I'm taking care of a patient or I'm working with a coworker that has views that differ from mine, so what?
Right.
You know, my job and my desire is to be the best partner to that nurse I'm working with or the best nurse to that patient I'm caring for, regardless of where our beliefs may differ. And if that nurse or that, if somebody wants to, we want to go to the coffee shop after work and have a conversation about our beliefs, I'm buying, you
Right.
know, I'm not
Right.
afraid to talk about my beliefs, but it's not going to affect the care I give or the way that I work with people I work with. Even if our views, the media would have people believe that because I'm a Christian, that there are certain groups of people that I hate.
Right.
And
Well,
well,
you do come from a state where you're always in the news.
yeah, we are.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, we are.
Look at me, Westboro Baptist Church.
Yeah,
Don't say gay.
yeah, yeah,
I'm
we
just
are.
being honest,
Yeah, we're in
but
the
it puts you in a hardest position because,
it does.
you don't strike me as that kind of person.
No,
But the problem is now you get lumped in with everybody.
yeah.
Yeah. So how do you deal with that?
Well, when I pastored a church, I had a thing I used to tell the congregation all the time: when in doubt, don't be a jerk.
Right.
You
That's
know
nice.
what?
I like that.
You're right. When in doubt, don't be a jerk. I actually told I was doing some education at the hospital today and for orientation for some new hires. And I told them that today. When in doubt, don't be a jerk. And
I know I'm not very religious, but listen to this, Jane. You better fucking pay attention. So Jane, who edits our podcast, she's Catholic and stuff, and I told her, I said, just what you said. I said, Jesus, he loved people. He stood with the poor. He healed the sick. He didn't go to church. He didn't go to church. And when he did go to church, he destroyed it because the people were being stupid. I said, so why can't you be like him? He wanted you to love people. Why can't we all be like that? Just love people, no matter what. Don't look down upon them. Just love them.
yeah, that's it. Because I mean, Jesus once asked, what is the greatest commandment? And he
Love.
said, first, love God. But then
Mhm.
he added to it and said, love your neighbor. And
So why
that,
don't we?
well, because people suck sometimes. I think
Yeah,
we covered that because sometimes
wait,
people suck.
wait, say that one more time for Jane.
Sometimes people
Say
suck.
because I told her that. I said, "Jane, people suck." I tell her that all the time. She don't listen to me. She doesn't believe me. So reflecting on your experiences, can you share an instance where you witnessed the impact of neglecting one or more of the 6 pillars on a nurse's well-being and professional performance? That's number 4 there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we've all worked with that nurse that had been there a few years too longer than he or she should have been, right? Like they stayed, and maybe it wasn't that they continued to be in nursing longer than they should have, but they stayed in this department that was killing them longer than they should have
Right,
and for whatever reason. And I think that that piece is it's much more important for work health for you to go someplace else. I remember I worked with a nurse one time. She had transferred from peds. She was an older nurse, and she was not. This was in the ER. I was charge nurse. She was not getting it. She was not making that transition to ER, and ER is different.
right,
It just is. And it's not good or bad to say to if you come to the ER and it doesn't work out, that doesn't mean you're a bad nurse.
right,
Now, if you stay there when it's not working out, that means you're a bad nurse.
right.
Because a good nurse says, you know what, this is not a good fit. Let me transfer. And this nurse didn't. And, I ended up unfortunately having to write her up a few times and she ended up getting fired. She did not have work health and it
Right,
affected her. She was so determined to be an ER nurse and it wasn't a good fit. She did not have a healthy relationship with work. I think we've all worked with nurses. I remember another instance, a guy I worked with, this guy had been through hell. Okay. His wife, he was in his late 20s only
mhm.
when I worked with him and he was a widower.
Holy
His
cow.
wife had,
Yeah.
yeah, his wife had gotten cancer and he had been by her side and been through all that and she had died.
Any
And
kids?
no, they didn't have any kids,
'Cause we
thankfully.
have a guy, we have a guy that I worked with, at the hospital, man. He was probably in his 30s, but the same thing, his wife had
Yeah.
cancer, but he's got a younger daughter,
Yeah.
and it devastated him, so
Yeah. Well, and this guy, come to find out later, he was diverting drugs, narcotics. He was stealing
mhm,
narcotics from the hospital. And I can't even fathom what he's been through.
Right.
Okay. But clearly his mental health, reasonably so. I mean, his mental health was a mess because of
Right.
what he had been through. And I'm not, but it affected his work.
Right.
It's
Was this in Florida?
yeah.
Do you guys have a diversion program like we do here in California?
Yeah, we've got it's called the Impaired Nursing Program
Oh, yeah.
in Florida, and unfortunately, when he was called out, he chose just to quit his
Yeah.
job. You
Well,
know,
here in California, they make it quite expensive to go through the program. Yeah, you got to pay
really,
fees and stuff. Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that, but
right?
yeah. So, all right. So, in your opinion, what are the key components of each the six pillars for nurses? How can they cultivate resilience and sustainability in their careers by nurturing these aspects in their lives?
Well, we could talk. Each one of the pillars could be a whole discussion in
Right.
itself when
That's a
talking
whole
about.
episode. Each pillar is a whole episode.
Yes, sir. But in the book, I do break that down into each one of the pillars. I break down into what I believe are the components of it. And I don't get into details. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a fitness
Right.
expert.
Yeah, you say
Um,
that in the book.
right. But I
Yeah.
know that most of us eat too much and don't do enough activity. Okay.
Right.
So, proper nutrition, physical activity of some sort,
Right.
rest, hydration. For physical health, those are the things.
Yeah, that was one thing I read in your book about the water because I don't drink water either. But you were talking about how they always tell us we have to drink so much water. But you're like, I gotta always go pee. I can't be drinking that much.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
It's true though.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, but how much is enough water? Is it really? I mean, I think every person is probably different, but
Well,
oh,
that's another one of those things that, if you went on the internet and looked, you'll find 100 different opinions.
right,
Where I've kinda landed is, what color is my urine?
right. I saw
You're
that. Yeah,
you're
what color?
yeah,
Light
you're a
yellow.
military man, that's how they if your urine is dark, you're not drinking enough water, and
Right,
somebody's gonna get in your face and yell at you and make you drink more
right,
water.
right.
Uh,
Well,
so,
do you
and
believe in your book? You talked about the BMI a little bit. Do you believe in the BMI?
I think that it's a tool, but,
I I personally
so
think it's bullshit.
yeah,
I'm
I do
just
too.
saying from my own personal opinion because I think the BMI doesn't really work anymore because, I mean, you could
No,
be to me, like, look at me. I'm 6 foot tall and I weigh 230 pounds now because I gained too much weight, but I'm morbidly obese.
right. Yeah.
You know what I
Well,
mean? But
I'm 5'10" and about 330. So, I mean, I
oh,
I absolutely need to lose a bunch of weight, okay?
me too.
According to the
I can
BMI,
feel
I
it
should
too.
be
Yeah.
I should be like 155.
They says I should weigh 170. I'm like, damn, I'd be like a stick.
Right. Yeah, exactly. There'd be nothing
That's why I
left
don't
of
believe.
me.
Yeah, that's why I don't know if the BMI is accurate anymore.
Yeah,
So
it's a little bit
I
of
agree with that.
backstory that's not in the book. I actually went to Marine Corps boot camp. Didn't
Oh,
finish. That's a long story,
so
but
you're a jarhead.
well, no, because I didn't finish boot camp, so I'm a quitter, I guess.
At least you tried.
That's right. But in my training platoon, there was a guy that came in that was overweight, even by the
Right,
Marine Corps standard. But the dude had shoulders like this, and his back was he could get up there and overhand do 20
right,
pull ups without breaking a sweat.
right.
Okay. But according to the BMI, he was morbidly obese.
See how
He's
crazy
like
that
five
is?
foot 10 and 250 or
Did they
240 or
kick him out?
something. No,
Alright.
no, they got a special waiver for him because he was a badass dude.
Yeah, of course, that's so stupid, that's why I hate that stupid thing.
Yeah, I do too. I think
Alright,
insurance
so
companies made it up so they could charge us fat people more.
I agree with that, that I agree with. Alright, so as a father and a husband, how do you model the importance of the 6 pillars to your family? What advice do you give healthcare professionals striving to maintain harmony across these while juggling their family responsibilities?
I've not done a good job for most of my life with many of these. Some of them have. Relationally, I've done a pretty good job with that.
How long you
Um,
been married?
28 years this past Saturday.
Oh, it's nice, look at you. Wait, 28 wonderful years.
28, well, 8 wonderful years. And no, yeah,
No, I
28
get that.
wonderful
I
years.
get I get you.
My wife's in the other room, so don't get
It's
me
a
in
hard
trouble,
look,
Kevin.
mine's right here. Look, mine's right here behind me listening to me, so I get you. It's hard.
Uh,
It's like having another job, man.
yeah, well, it is. It's
It
work.
is.
So I think that what I do good now is modeling for my children that, yeah, I've not always done good at this,
Right.
but I can still
Improve.
fix it.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
can put in
Never
the
too late.
work I'm 48 years old. I'll be 49 this weekend. I can put
Happy
in the
birthday.
work thank you. And I can put in the work, and even though I've not been good at some of these things for a very long time, it's not too late to go back and fix it.
Right.
And so
That's right.
now that's how I model it for my children. As far as healthcare professionals trying to maintain that harmony with their familiar responsibilities, I think that it comes down to that list that we talked about earlier.
Right.
Okay. So for me,
We're talking
my
about the list from your one exercise.
correct.
Yeah, I
Yep.
got you. Okay.
So for me, I don't think we actually explained what that list is for your listeners or what that exercise was. So I asked in the
I don't
exercise,
want to give away too much and stuff because it's your book. So
well, that's fine. They
yeah.
still need to buy the book and read it
Yeah,
because
buy the book and read the book so you'll know.
it's
I
right.
agree with that. It's a good book. Look, not
Um,
only does your book give good information, but it gives exercise, so it helps put the pieces of the puzzle together. It does do that.
right. That's what I
Yeah,
was hoping for. But the point of that exercise is to for people to realize that if I say husband is my number one identity,
right.
so when I made my list, I realized that nurse wasn't even in the top 5 for me.
Mine was number 3.
Okay. But we oftentimes there's the old saying that you can tell what people really care about by if you check their checking account, their checkbook.
Right, 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 right,
Okay. I would say that you can also check their calendar. And if your calendar shows a lot of missed events, missed family
right,
events more, then you're showing that you value work more than
right,
your family. So if husband is my first priority and father is my second, so those were my top one and two. Okay.
right. That was me too.
Then I need to make sure that my calendar reflects that. Now, that means for me, part of that means I drive a 13-year-old Chevy Silverado that I actually love with 100 and almost 150,000 miles on it instead of a 2-year-old Mercedes.
Right,
Okay. Because I don't want a $700 car payment that means
right.
I have to work 6 days a week just so I can pay it.
100% agree with that. I don't want any car payments at all.
Me neither.
Right,
I don't have any. We got my wife drives a 2006
right,
Chevy Trailblazer, and we
right,
love the heck out of both of them. You know?
right. Because you don't, you're debt free. You don't have to own, you're not owed by anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I
Go
think
ahead.
that balance that you asked about, that harmony, I think it comes down to looking at the list after you've done that exercise and asking, does my checkbook and my calendar look the same as my list?
I got
If
you.
it doesn't, then something's gotta change. Sell the car, buy a smaller house, sell some of your fancy purses, cancel
But
the girls' weekend,
But do you
whatever it
really
is.
think do you really think that nurses are gonna change their living and their lifestyle?
Well,
Or are
if
they
they
gonna
if
keep up with the Joneses?
that's it, many of them will not.
Right.
Unfortunately, many people will read my book and not change anything.
And they'll still keep bitching about how life sucks,
Right,
but they won't make any changes.
right. If you hate your job so much, make some changes so you don't have to be there as often.
Magic, isn't it? Alright, so your book emphasizes the concept of restoration. I like that because, restoration, transformation, I agree with you. How do you
Mhm.
advocate for nurses to prioritize their physical health, their mental health, their relationship, and spiritual? Because I'm on a big kick right now because a lot of us, I don't know how you feel about this, but a lot of us are, and I know Florida doesn't have it, but here in California, we have ratios. And
Mhm.
so, like, you can't get more than 4 patients to one nurse, but hospitals still push you over guides because nurses won't say no.
Right.
So how can you advocate? How do you help nurses try to advocate for themselves so they don't, put themselves at risk or the patients at risk, themselves at risk?
Well, I think that some of it comes down to what you mentioned earlier, choosing guilt over resentment. Okay. So, charge nurse or the manager calls and says, "Hey, we're really short. Can you come in?" You may feel guilty if you don't go, but if you go, sooner or later, enough of that, or you take that extra patient, you're going to feel guilty not taking that patient. But so you say yes and you take that extra patient, but that builds up over time and turns into resentment, whether it's
Right.
resentment for your manager or for your employer or for nursing in general.
That's right. In your book, you talk about that. You talk about you pick up the phone call because you get your day off, you're watching TV and stuff, and then somebody calls and says, "Hey man, can you come to work?" And what do you do? Most people,
Yeah, most people say, "Okay, yeah, what time?" I'll be there as
yeah.
fast as I can. But
Why though? I mean, we love money so much that we want to pick up an extra shift, and then we're bitching because we're working too much.
I don't even think it's completely a money thing necessarily. For some, it
What do you
certainly is.
What do you think it is then?
I think a lot of it is an identity thing. Okay.
Mm,
And, society tells women, unfortunately, are in a really tough spot right now.
right.
If you don't work enough, then you're a terrible woman. If you
Right.
work too much, you're a terrible woman.
Right.
If you're a stay-at-home mom, you're a terrible woman. So they really can't win, you
Well, I hear a
know?
lot of crap on TikTok now where women are bitching because men don't make enough money, but yet they wanted to be the breadwinners. So now
Right.
that the breadwinners, they're bitching because the guys ain't got enough
True.
money. So you're
You wanted
damned if you do, damned if you don't.
you wanted to be the boss bitch, and
R-
now you are, so you make more money than he does.
Right. Now they're mad because they make more money though.
Right,
You
right.
can't have it both ways.
But I think that we're so many of us are so wrapped up in that identity, two things,
Mm,
that the identity as a nurse
right.
over our identity as the other things on our list. And two, we've been convinced from nursing school that making choices that are bad for ourselves, bad for our family, all that is what a nurse does. So if my entire identity or the majority of my identity is I'm a nurse, and a nurse means I do these things that might be bad for my family or for my own health, then I do those things, even
Right.
if I don't want to, because that's who I am.
Right. So how do you think we got here to identifying ourselves? Like when you're talking about your list, how do you think people got there to identifying number one as a nurse and everything else is second nature?
Honestly, I think it's just something that most people have never taken the time to think about.
But do you think we were taught this way by our parents, by our society growing up? Because when I was growing up, I'm not that much older than you, but I'm sure you remember this. When I was growing up, we only had one person working, and then it wasn't until around maybe 1972, 73, both parents started working because we had to make ends meet with two parents. And after that, that's kind of when we started falling off the wagon in America.
I think that a lot of this comes from the fact that most people have never stopped to think about it.
Mm,
Okay. They don't realize that I've built my identity around this job I do. And this is not unique to nursing. You
right,
see this in career military men and women. You
right.
see this
That's true.
in law enforcement, EMS, fire. I've seen police officer, firefighter, paramedic retires and dies a year or two later
Right,
because they no longer know they've lost their
right,
identity and there's no
right.
reason to live and they're dead within a year or two.
I see that in nursing too, because people
Yeah,
always tell me they're
absolutely.
gonna retire, and I say, "Well, what happens when you retire?" They don't have an answer. I'm like, exactly. What are you gonna do when you retire? Because this has been your whole life. And
Yeah,
as soon as you retire, most people die and stuff because they don't have any other identity. That's true,
right. Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And I think it's just a result of they haven't taken the time to sit down and do this exercise that's in the book and realize nurse is not the most important part of who I am.
Right. All right. So we're getting close to the end. So I know I didn't get to all the questions, but I'm gonna get to the last question. I'm gonna go to question 15 because I wanted to give you the opportunity as a pastor and a registered nurse, what guidance would you offer nurses seeking to align their professional calling? And I don't know how I feel about that professional calling thing, but with spiritual beliefs while also prioritizing their physical, mental, financial, and relational health. Because I know you are a pastor and that's part of your life.
Yeah,
So, how do
yeah.
you mentor us? How do you minister to us?
First of all, I'm with you on the calling thing. I don't necessarily think that nursing is a calling.
Right,
Those of us that end up in nursing, I think we have a calling to help people,
right.
and nursing is but you can do that as a
You do
mechanic,
that. Right,
you
that's
know,
right.
or anything, okay? And I think that a lot of the problems that we have, well, I'm called to this, so I need to make these unhealthy choices as it's
That's
my
exactly right.
calling.
Right,
Well, how do nurses seeking to align their professional calling and their spiritual beliefs while also prioritizing these other things? Well, I think that I made a pretty good case in the book for the fact that, at least as a Christian, these other pillars are part of our spiritual life. Many Christians, pastors included, try to separate them, but it's all a part of who we are. Okay.
right,
So prioritizing those things is prioritizing your spiritual beliefs. Okay. We'll say aligning their job as a nurse and their spiritual beliefs. I think a lot of that goes back to what we talked about earlier, where, you know, you and I are basically the same age. Like you said, my older brother is the same age as you. So you remember back in the day, the WWJD, what would Jesus do
right, right.
bracelets? I mean, they were everywhere, right?
Everywhere.
And but there is some wisdom in that. It's
Right,
kind of corny, okay? But there's some wisdom in that for a Christian that is trying to say, okay, how do I align these two? And a big part of it is what we talked about earlier. Jesus loved people.
right,
Okay. People that were hurting, people that sometimes were nasty. When we read the crucifixion story, as he hung on the cross, he cried out forgiveness to the very people that hung him there.
Right.
And if, as a Christian, or really, I mentioned this in the book as well, but spiritual health is not just a Christian thing.
Right.
I've seen polls where they ask people in America if they consider themselves religious. And in these days, it's around 50-50 would say that they're
Right.
religious. But if they ask if they're consider themselves to
Spiritual.
be spiritual, the vast majority, 90 some
That's
percent
like,
of people
yeah.
say yes
Right.
to that. And spirituality, spiritual health is, if everybody basically agrees that we're spiritual beings, then we can connect on that
Right. That's right. I agree
without
with that.
necessarily having the same exact religious
Right.
beliefs or even the same definition of what spirituality means,
Right.
but
But at
we're
least
still
you're open
spiritual.
to it, though. Most people aren't open to that, though. At least you're open to it. You sound
Yeah,
like you're open to it. You're, willing to talk about it. You don't shut
absolutely.
people off. And
Nah,
yeah, I get you. But it makes a huge difference, though.
yeah,
Because, that's the one thing I took away from your book. You apologize for maybe something that somebody did to you to turn you away from that. So it makes a big difference. I
yeah.
get that.
I grew up in those churches too, my
I
friend. My
know. I know.
my
I
father was
know.
a my father was a Southern Baptist pastor, and he did a pretty good job as a pastor, but some of those churches were just
They
tough.
were rough. Well,
They
I
were.
tell people looking, and I'm not saying it was all religion, but looking back, I felt like I grew up in a damn cult and stuff because of the way they
Yeah,
behaved and stuff. And
some of these
it was
churches
pretty
are like
rough.
that, bro.
Yeah, it was pretty
100%.
rough, man.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to encourage everybody to buy his book, Matt Norman. It's called The Restored Nurse. Right, you can get it on Amazon, and we'll have Jane put it in the link, and then when we post it on our Facebook page and TikTok page, we'll put the link in there too. Is there anything you would like to leave us with before we let you go?
I'd love for anybody to follow me on, TikTok. That's where I'm the most active, that big bald nurse.
Right, the
Pretty
big
funny,
bald nurse.
that big bald nurse, that's me. And other than that, man, I think that this book is not about me making money. Am I making a little bit of money off of it?
Yeah,
Sure, but
it's
it's
only
really
$10. Don't be cheap, you bastards.
right,
They're
exactly.
money hoarders anyway.
You
So
guys are working too many hours anyway,
right,
so use
pick up
use a
an
little bit of
extra
that money.
shift and buy his book.
Right, exactly. But it really is about helping nurses. I mean, I legitimately love nurses.
Right,
They're some of the best people you can
I
be
can feel it
around.
in you. I do. I can feel it in you. That's what I love about it.
I
Yeah,
appreciate that, man. I
yeah.
appreciate that. And I just get the book and
Do the
read it,
exercises.
do the exercises, and go into it with an open mind.
Right, I
And
did.
I just
Everybody
want
who knows me here knows that I'm not a religious person, but I am spiritual. I read it and I enjoyed it and I learned from it and I did the exercise. I didn't get to read all of it yet, but I will. I'll keep doing the exercises. So I
yeah.
think I'm on exercise number 3 soon.
Okay,
But I
good.
learned from it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
enjoyed it.
This book doesn't
Yeah.
have all of the answers, but it is a place for people to start.
No, but it's good. I liked it. I think it's a really good book. I was really surprised by it. So I liked it a
Appreciate that.
lot. And I'm still learning. And I encourage everybody to get it. It's called The Restored Nurse, and it's on Amazon. Again, we'll put it in the link when we post everything. And don't forget to follow him on TikTok, the Bald Nurse. No, the bald. What is it
That big
called?
bald nurse.
That Big Bald Nurse. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll follow you too, so that way we can connect and
absolutely.
push your book out too. I appreciate it, man.
All
All right,
right.
you guys. I appreciate you watching us on the Transformation Nurse Academy podcast. We appreciate you guys. Thank you, Matt. You
You're
guys
welcome.
have a great day, man. Thank you.
Don't miss out. Engage with us weekly, share your thoughts, and let's transform the nursing landscape together.